Hi, this is Bob Scully, and welcome to another edition of the World Show, Entrepreneurs, the Fiera Series. Successful entrepreneurs, by definition, are winners, but some are jackpot winners. Very few can say, as our guest can, that their products are found worldwide in every aspect of their industry. Greg Walton can say that because Dynaplast parts are found in every automobile line produced around the world. And this is something that he achieved through hard work and much thinking. And Greg Walton is also an energetic man, a great family man, and an athlete. And when I met him at his factory, Dynaplast, I was told that he had an appointment to make. The appointment was a hockey game, and I thought, yeah, right, this is Canada. Except he's in the hockey game with people 20 years his junior, and I'll bet you he outskates them. Here's Greg Walton. Greg Walton, there's a wonderful, I won't call it a statistic, there's a wonderful factoid in the research about Dynaplast. Every line of car in the world today has a Dynaplast part in it somewhere. How did you get to that?
Well, virtually everyone, that's actually true. We sell over 20 million parts a year to our customers, and they're using those in various kinds of assemblies. So it's appearing in the accessory drive at the front of the car where the serpentine belt goes through. So pulleys are one of our main products, as well as brake boosters inside of most of the master cylinders. So we continue as the world gets to be a smaller place, and there's more and more cars being developed in different countries. The technology is still good and ends up going around the world with it.
And when you traveled, you look under the hood of
you always like to see that serpentine
and
belt going around, and yeah, all the time.
And you're never disappointed.
Never disappointed.
But what happens if suddenly there's another guy's stuff in there? I mean, you do have competitors, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have competitors. It's very interesting. We don't have a one single competitor. We have different competitors in different kinds of products that we supply. But yeah, there's no one that we line up against all the time. So we've got different pulley suppliers or different brake booster suppliers or...
And is all of it through plastic injection and molding?
Yeah, we're a precision injection molder, which means that we're using highly engineered resins all the time. So the competition is relatively limited to that in, say, the low-cost countries of the world, just because the resins are extremely expensive and more rare. So yeah, we would utilize that around the world.
And plastic, when you hear the word plastic, in your mind's eye, you think of something fragile. Resin sounds tough. But in fact, either way, there's less and less metal in cars, am I right?
Yes. There's been initiatives ongoing now for over 30 years to lightweight the car. And so you go from kind of heavy stamped steel into cast and machined aluminum, into thermal sets, and now you're into more injection molding, lighter grade aluminum, and those kinds of things. So it's been a real journey in the technology of the car, and it continues to go onward. The thing with plastics is there's just so many different applications for it that you're able to, go into different areas of the car. For instance, now we're really looking at replacing kind of machined aluminum as a target product line that we would go after, and you're into steering columns and those kinds of activities. Not the entire column, of course, but different applications around it, and every ounce counts.
And aside from weight, though, people always think of safety in the case of a crash. Overall, are these new materials as solid, quote unquote, as the old ones? I know they're lighter,
of course, yes. Obviously, you're going through the same and more rigorous testing than you ever have. As these vehicles become more durable and better as we go along here, the age of cars is continuing to rise because they're good.
Yeah.
What keeps people buying the new ones is now with the new gizmos and the electronics in the car, which the car's increasingly becoming electrified. So people are really quite interested in kind of keeping up on the technology as opposed to their car just wearing out.
So planned obsolescence is not a go in that industry?
No, it's almost going in the wrong direction for that. But nevertheless, they still manage to sell more and more cars every year. Certainly North America right now is approaching the best years that we've ever seen.
And will it ever be all electric, or is that a pipe dream?
Oh, I think you'll certainly see increased electrification, and I think right now the technology is probably ready. It's more the legal that's going to slow you down in terms of if a driverless car hits someone, who's going to go to court?
No, of course, the driverless is probably the other horizon.
Yes.
But I was just wondering, the end of hydrocarbons, is that for real or not?
It may be at some point. I think, everyone kind of prolongs their technology as best they can, and I think the carbon-based still have a few tricks up their sleeve here yet. Do things a little more cost effectively than they do now.
And you have spent, if we look at your entrepreneurial story now, you've spent most of your life, perhaps all of your professional life, in the automotive industry in one way or another. But it gives me the impression that before you took over Dynaplast, there was a plan there. You were learning. You were on a big learning curve. Did you think you would run something so big and own it at the outset?
Well, no, I didn't. I came out of University of Waterloo with a mathematics degree of all things, and my last few co-op terms, I was able to go into General Motors. And General Motors I was at for 10 years, and really was very fortunate to get into a few different areas in General Motors: production, engineering, purchasing, selling within General Motors, and it was a very nice preparation. I went to CAMI, which was a joint venture between Suzuki and General Motors after that, where at that point in time you really got a feel for the international flavor by working with the Suzuki folks in Japan. So you kind of got a good base from that side, and then after that I went to Magna International, which
The
was
auto parts giant.
Auto parts giant, which was a huge, upswing in terms of your learning capabilities. I was doing purchasing. It's probably the definition of entrepreneurship as far as I'm concerned with what Frank Stronach did. And what I was able to do from that is kind of take the best parts of their system in terms of paying people, what they're bringing forward to you, hiring people and putting them into spots that may be, according to the business books, above their head or outside their capabilities, and allowing them to go forward. Absolutely. And so was able to take all that and bring that forward into this company, Dynaplast, where you're able to take kind of the best of all worlds and run it as your own.
And did you have one of those entrepreneurial sort of lightning bolts where you said to yourself one day, "Hey, if Frank Stronach can do it, so can I"?
Well, I think there is a spot, a little niche that we're trying to carve out for ourselves, and that really is on the tier 2 side, where the tier 2s, of which Dynaplast is one, would sell to the bigger companies, the Magnas, the Bosches, those kinds of folks who are putting the modules into the OEMs. I really see a case for a professionally managed and run, with good engineering and good ethics, if you will. There's a spot in the automotive world for that, for sure.
Obviously.
And that's really what we've strived to fill. And as we continue to go forward and grow, that's where I see a huge ability to expand.
The reason I asked the previous question is because great entrepreneurs are so self-confident, sometimes it's contagious. And they create other entrepreneurs who used to work for them and who hadn't thought of doing it on their own, but they look at the boss and they say, "Me too." Did that happen to you?
It not so much. This is very much addressed in kind of the Magna model, where you would take the guys who are kind of your best and could be your competitors at some point, and making sure that you take care of them well enough and give them their own kind of runway to do what they want to do and expand themselves. We're certainly not at that stage at Dynaplast yet, but that's certainly where we could take this.
And you rode the revolution in a way in the automotive industry, because there you were at General Motors in its, I don't want to say its heyday, but certainly better days, before the terrible economic difficulties that beset it. You saw the old model, in other words. I'm told it was like the Pentagon. They had layers and layers of people doing fun things or high-tech things. And then the whole industry started to disintegrate. The vertical integration started to come apart through people like Stronach, who said, we can do parts for all of these manufacturers. When you went from General Motors to Magna, were you conscious of that this was a real revolution?
Absolutely. When I first was at Magna, they had over 50% of the market. Back in the Roger Smith days. I don't want to date myself that much, but certainly
Michael Moore didn't put you in the movie, though.
he didn't put me in the movie. No, I was just a little fella in those days. But certainly, as you went over to Magna, and the car companies really did look at it and say, if I'm going to spend my money, I need to spend it on my vehicles and not on making the parts for it. And I think that there was certainly, that business model is a pretty smart one in terms of where you spend your capital, and that is something that Magna's very cognizant of as well. You make sure that you spend your money on things that are unique, that will put you ahead of the competition, as opposed to just backwardly integrating to protect yourself. Now, the OEMs, the General Motors, the Fords, etc., they did spend a whole lot of money throughout the years in ensuring their supply was good. And technology-wise, though, I think there was a push towards seeing that the suppliers could supply things, or to be a little more nimble than some of the car companies and bring them ideas, as opposed to just the car companies plowing ahead with their own technologies.
And there's that famous quip, I think it was an analyst at one of the brokerages who said, General Motors is not a car company, it's a pension fund and health insurance company. That's how top-heavy it was. Did you sense that when you were inside, that this couldn't last?
Yes. There was definitely... The thing that concerned me at General Motors is that you had a lot of folks in there who saw it as the enemy instead of the benefactor, and there was a level of bitterness towards the company, and it was not what you would want to work in terms of an environment.
It wasn't fair.
It wasn't. No. The vehicles themselves were good vehicles. I mean, they would constantly, though, apologize for the last set of vehicles and say, this next set is going to be that much better. And then 5 years after that, they would be apologizing for that. So, in terms of the company themselves, there were some tremendous people at that company, and there continues to be to this day. I think that there was a lot of difficulty in kind of making sure that you were continuing to be politically correct and making sure that you were, doing all the things you had to do. And sometimes that got in the way of making good cars.
And when you were at Magna, and you were about to make the transition, when you first went to Dynaplast, again, you weren't going as an owner. You didn't buy it outright.
No.
But were you conscious that this might be it, the golden ring?
No, I didn't. I didn't think it was at that point. I actually had a short stop at a company in between that was in a similar type of business, but was a little bit ill financially. And so when I came to Dynaplast, there was probably 5 or 6 similarly structured companies in Southern Ontario that were all kind of in niche businesses that were each owned by different private equity companies, and everyone was trying to get the other guys to buy theirs. And so there was kind of a little bit of an orphan type of situation at each of these companies. And when I got there, there was certainly some abilities that I saw to be able to get this thing healthy financially, or more healthy financially than it was.
Were they happy to unload it on you?
Well, it wasn't. They always said that they wanted to sell the company, whether it was an MBO, management buyout, or whether it was to someone else. But they wanted, the company had a few cracks in it, and they wanted to make sure that someone could go in and kind of clean up the messes so that it would be much more presentable for sale. For myself, I never considered, going and buying something out, because I never thought that I could have the wherewithal to do that.
But you found financing.
Well, I found financing, and one person's bad luck is another one's good luck.
Yeah.
And certainly
Your timing was good.
when the crash of 2008 and 2009 in automotive, I mean, there were months there, a couple of months in between, where you were selling 15% of your normal product load, and that can bring any company to its knees, and certainly it did at Dynaplast.
And that's when you became an owner.
It was shortly after that. We did a lot of tough decisions in those days, where you had to let some really fine people go, and some longer standing people with the company. You had to kind of shrink down how you were working, the kinds of concessions you would let go to the customer. I mean, it became a very difficult time to do business because everyone was hurting, whether it was the customer or whether it was the suppliers.
And in the research I read, you told Francine Blaze, our senior producer, that in addition to the human difficulty of letting people go, there was another piece of pain attached to it, which is you couldn't get them back when you wanted them back.
Well, automotive is very cyclical and is very up and down, and there was never a deeper trough, I guess, certainly in my history and from what I understand the history of automotive, where things went from so good to so bad. And so there were a lot of people who've been through, over their years, if they're 30, 40 years in automotive, they've been through 5 or 6 of these cycles, and a lot of folks just couldn't stand it anymore because every time you're thinking you're okay, and all of a sudden you're worrying about your mortgage payments. So yeah, a lot of the skilled trades in particular left and set up their own deals, whether they became their own entrepreneurs, running a gift shop somewhere up north or doing whatever. And to this day, we still have a hole in that industry, the tool and die makers, and some of the skilled trades situation where they just don't want to get attached to the ups and downs of automotive.
But you didn't go under. That's that's the proof of the pudding.
No, we had a
but
few.
You slashed and
we cut things down, but at the same time we kept our engineers and our key technical people, and we kept our sales folks, so that we had a consistent face to our customers. And we made real sure that, there was a few people at the company who didn't take a salary for a period of time, and we just kind of got through it. And the company itself really kind of bonded together at that point in time. And right from the operators on the floor to everyone in the company, there was a real sense of survival, and we had to band together and just make sure that we kind of got through to the next payroll, and then after that, things continued to get a little better and a little better, and the automotive volumes came back. And what it did do is really cleaned out a lot of kind of players, certainly in Southern Ontario and in Detroit and New York. Any players who weren't on their game, who really didn't know what they were doing,
and if you managed to put your parts in every line of automotive, you became the market leader throughout all this.
Yeah, some cases by default, but yes.
Doesn't matter.
Whatever way you came there.
A goal is a goal.
A goal is a goal,
just
whether
like
it's a
hockey.
deflection or,
And so when you look at the company today, is it poised to acquire and perhaps grow even bigger?
Yes. Yeah, it is. We have there's a lot of automotive investment now in Mexico, so we have a lot of customers who are trying to get us to move to Mexico. So certainly that's an option that we have to look at. We have 2 facilities in Ontario, and we're looking now to see what else is in the southern U.S. or in the rest of Canada or in Mexico itself. But there's some real kind of forks in the road when you come to look at those kinds of investments, that you've got to think about what you're going to do.
But you're a non-outsourcer. You're still a proud Canadian manufacturer, so these acquisitions would extend. You're not moving out.
No, we're committed to staying where we are in Toronto as our base. There's a great technical base around there where you've got a lot of history in manufacturing for automotive, but you've also got some real good facilities, both colleges and universities that are close by that we work very closely with now. So there's a good talent supply around, and we've started hiring folks right out of school or within a year out of school and kind of shaping them in our own direction, and found that to be very successful for us and quite enjoyable for them.
And I'm searching for the name. There's a sociologist who wrote a book in the U.S. that got a lot of attention because he says we think there's been tremendous progress these past few years, but not as much as in the first half of the 20th century. We're wrong about the pace of change. It's not that great. And he has this phrase that's been quoted: we wanted flying cars, and what we got was 140 characters in a tweet.
Yes.
In other words, there's 2 kinds of change: big change and just superficial change. How much will cars, I know they won't fly, at least not anytime soon, but how much will they change over the next few years? What can we expect?
I think you're going to continue to see the cars becoming more and more intuitive. Right now, the focus is on keep your hands on the wheel and be able to do everything that you want to do. You know, whether it's communicate with your friends or see what's happening, you know, on Facebook or whatnot. So
do your nails.
Do your nails. Maybe one hand at a time. But certainly the cars, you know, creature comfort wise, there's certainly a focus on that. I think as the population ages, you know, getting in and out of your car, you know, just things that you wouldn't even think about, you know, when you're first buying a car. These are things that are now going into it. You know, you also look at car buying habits are completely different than what they used to be. When I was a kid, I could think of nothing better than having a Camaro with big fat tires and thrush mufflers. And now
Lots
people
of
are
noise.
more interested in what kind of stereo is it, or do I even want a car? Our
they're
car buyers have
sharing
become our car buyers have almost become refrigerator buyers, where they're much more interested in the capacity and the square footage of it type of thing, and as opposed to having something that's hot.
And the old saw, it's not an old saw, it's an unfortunate truth that autopilots on airplanes have made for worse pilots, a little bit lazier, a little bit less attentive. These cars that do everything for you, isn't there a danger there?
Yeah, there is. You know, in terms of, you know, if you're turned around in your car looking at the kids in the back seat and the car has to stop for you.
Yeah, it's not
I
reassuring
don't
because
think
the
that's
day the
good.
machine fails, it will probably stop better than you would.
Yes.
But the day that program, that computer software fails.
Well, yes, and I mean, in the old days, you would have just had your crash. Now you might have a crash. You know, so it does kind of take maybe some of the sharpness out of it, but again, that's what the world wants. The world wants backup systems, and the world wants fail-safe.
And we were kidding before the interview in the makeup room about the Waltons. But in fact, the Waltons are a big part of this research. We'll end on that. Your wife has had quite a career in the field of psychology.
Yes.
And the kids and the grandkids and so on. I think that has helped you to do all these things which are quite risky and tough to do.
My wife has been my rock right from the get-go. We actually met in university, and she's been right behind me ever since. Every time I've wanted to take a chance, she's been right there behind me. We look at what can we give back to society, and her business is really that. She's a child psychotherapist, and so she's helping kids that have had some nasty history in their life, and she's really helped a lot of folks in those days. So it's not something that is gonna put us on the Forbes list, but it's certainly something that we're very proud of.
And indeed you should be. And you don't have to answer, but I'm going to leave you with our French chef question, which is one of our favorite questions. We often ask French chefs, what do they have in the fridge at home, and what do they eat when they're alone at night? So can you tell us what car you drive?
I drive a General Motors pickup truck.
Oh, okay.
And I've had a couple of them in a row. I actually had my youngest son had an accident a few years ago where he ended up off the road and down about a 30-foot embankment. And all of the panels were crushed on the car, except he walked up to the side without a scratch, really.
Wow.
So
And that was a GM product?
That was a GM product with a
wow.
Magna hydroform frame.
Okay, well, I hope you didn't lose any other clients. But
No, we
good.
didn't.
It's
But
good to
so
know.
that's what I drive.
All right, Greg Walton, long life to you and to Dynaplast.
Thank you so much.
Greg Walton, and now here's something else coming up on the World Show.
Oh, I was involved in promoting freedom and human rights in the Soviet Union, in the late 80s, early 90s. Then after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, I thought that would be over and I could do other things in chess or in my private life. But when I saw Putin coming back, I mean, that's Putin rising. No, it's the KGB coming back. And I could see the signs of the restoration, of future restoration. I thought that probably I would have to quit my chess career eventually. I thought I would do it one day, and to fight for restoration of democratic institutions and protection of human rights in Russia. And I did it in 2005. 10 years ago, I quit chess and I moved to the area which people mistakenly call politics in Russia, because we never had a true political fight there. Our fight was not to win elections, but to have elections. And I knew that, if you are engaged in this fight, you have to take the risk. I mean, you have to lead people who follow you And often I was on the front line. I was beaten, arrested, harassed in many forms. But at the end of the day, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, those what I called vegetarian times, because you could end up in jail for 5 or 10 days. Today, for the same peaceful demonstration, you would be sent for 5 or 10 years.
Greg Walton was our guest this week on Entrepreneurs, the Fiera series of the World Show. I'm Bob Scully. Have a great week. Thanks.